So welcome to free training today, brought to you from Space Coast Pool School. I'm Lauren Broom, and Clemente and I talked, and I tend to do trainings either monthly or quarterly or whatever it ends up being when a great topic like this comes up. I want to bring it to the audience, to the industry for free training, and make it so that people everywhere can listen to it with the great technology that we have available, like with Zoom and everything else that we have. So I'm with Space Coast Pool School. A little bit about me is I am a PHTA instructor. I teach a CPO class. I teach in-person, virtual, and I teach a certified pool inspector course virtually now. And I also am now teaching brand new to the industry. I don't think anybody else is OSHA 10 certification for the pool industry specifically. So my OSHA 10 is specifically in general industry for the service side, but it will be specifically examples from our industry, not a general class that you can buy online. And it would be a 2-day live virtual class with me. I'm an authorized OSHA instructor now for OSHA 10 and 30 in general industry specifically. I intend to get construction down the road, but I got to do one hurdle at a time. So that's my contact info there. And I'm going to now introduce our speaker today, who is also a PHTA CPO instructor as well. And his name is Clemente Rivera, and he's going to be speaking to you guys today on regenerative filters. So I'm going to hand it off to him, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And thank you for being on today, Clemente, and presenting on something very interesting that we don't hear a lot about.
Thank you. And y'all can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right, so regenerative filtration. We all know the different types of filtration that's available in the commercial pool industry. Regenerative filtration is a relatively new, even though it's been about, it's almost 20 years now that that regen really took off into the market. What a lot of people really don't know is that it was actually invented in the 1960s. A company called Filtrex, which is still around today. They're the ones that actually invented regen filtration. Basically, it's a pressure DE system. Instead of using grids, we use tubes, and because the tubes can be compacted together, it allows for a much smaller footprint of for the filter compared to like a vacuum DE system. Those tubes are what where the DE or the perlite get coated on, and allows for the surface filtration that we all know about in a DE system. Again, you get a smaller footprint, and it's pretty amazing to see how small these filters are compared to, you know, relative to the size of the filter. I think the largest size tank is about anywhere from 55 to 60 inches in diameter, and that will do a 1 million gallon pool. The unique feature of a regen filter is what we call the bump cycle. So what happens is you actually regenerate that surface filtration on the tubes by removing the media and the dirt from time to time, and then pre-coating the media back onto the tubes. And what that does is it restores the surface filtration that we're looking for on this type of filter. Okay, it's not like a sand filter where the bed depth collects all the dirt. It's actually just the surface that's filtering the water. Because of this, your filtration cycles are extended because of this regeneration of the filter surface area. Depending on the design and the sizing, as well as the bather use, you can get anywhere from 2 weeks So almost a full year out of one pre-coat. So that's pretty amazing. I've seen those facilities that actually get 1 year out of their filter. It's pretty amazing stuff. So of course that filter is a lot bigger. It's running at a different gallons per minute per square foot, but you know that's those are decisions that are made by the engineer of design when you're building a new pool or or doing a retrofit on an existing pool. So to start the filter cycle, we start with an empty tank. We actually vacuum the media into the filter. It's not done. The pre-coat is not like the like a pressure DE system where you have to have a container that's connected to the suction side and things like that. You actually vacuum it in, and then you start the pump. It fills with the water. Very important. Ooh, got auto lights here. So you have to make sure you bleed out all the air out of the system, or else you're not going to have very good results. The last thing you want is for media to get into the pool. Bleeding out the system should be relatively easy. The instructions on whichever brand you have will tell you how to completely bleed the air out. Then you start your pump. Everything is done on the control panel of the Regen filter, so there's no need to run across the room and turn things on. Everything's done at the control center. So you'll hit start, and the system will go into what's called a pre-coat. So if you see over here, this gives you a diagram of what a pre-coat cycle looks like. So there's usually a valve, an effluent valve here, and then there's a pre-coat valve here. So you have your pump, water goes in. During a pre-coat, you have a slurry that's in there once you fill the tank up with water, and it's going to coat the tubes. And what will come out is over time you'll have clean water come out, and it'll just do this cycle for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then once that cycle is done, it will then open the effluent valve and it will close the pre-coat valve, and then you'll come to the filtration cycle, which is what this looks like. Okay, so all of the Regen filters that are out there, water comes into the bottom of the tank, comes up, works its way up, and then comes out of the top and then out to the return line. So it'll get heated, treated with chemicals, and then back to the pool. So then there's the bump cycle. So either most manufacturers will use the once a day method, but originally it is actually set that if you meet a certain pressure differential, which is usually anywhere from 12 to 15 psi, that's when the bump occurs. To be honest, I like the daily method because it really ensures that long filter cycle. And there's people out there that don't allow their Regen filter to bump automatically. So it's a good idea to when they hit that bump button that they do it during a slow period. I like to set my filters to nighttime, and if there's a problem, usually you'll get a call first thing in the morning, or if you have 24/7 operations, they tend to know real quick if there's an issue, but 99% of the time it should be flawless. So what happens during a bump is the pump will stop, and then the system will activate via pneumatics. It'll activate this bump assembly. And what it'll do is it's always inflated when it's in filter mode. It will all of a sudden just evacuate the air, and it'll drop. and that drop will cause the media to loosen and come off. And then what it does, it just floats in suspension, and it'll bump several times. Usually the standard is about 10, and it'll go down, then up, then down and up until it's all loose, until the media is all loosened up. Then it'll go into a pre-coat cycle again. The pump will start, the effluent valve will close, and the pre-coat valve will open, like I showed earlier, and it will recoat. It'll recoat the tubes and then go back into filter mode. So, got a little video here from the archives of Neptune Benson. You can find this in YouTube, but this is what the a pre-coat looks like. They actually, in the early days, they actually had a test vessel, and this is what they showed. They even took this to some trade shows at some point, but this is what a bump cycle looks like inside of a regen filter. So you have your flex tube in the coated state. This would be the filter cycle. That's a bump, and that's what happens to the tubes. It just completely collapses. The perlite will go into solution, and then in a couple of seconds you'll see the pre-coat cycle start. And this is a small vessel, so it's going to go quick. You can already see the tubes. That means that the perlite is coating, and then it skips to what it looks like again. So at the end, you end up with fully coated tubes. All right, pretty simple idea. So the benefits. So obviously, one of the biggest benefits is you have a small footprint, which means you'll have a smaller filter room design. Longer filtration cycles, like I said, anywhere from 2 weeks to almost a year. I know a lot of like summer pools, like water parks and things like that are open seasonal. They can run one season off of one pre-coat. All right. There's no backwashing. So when you reach the point where your pressure differential doesn't change after a bump, it means it's time to change the media because it's saturated with dirt. So you simply dump the contents of the tank, refill it. You might want to rinse, so you can refill it twice, up to twice, and then start the system up again. Vacuum more media, fill the tank, run the pre-coat, and you're back in business. So the only water you really use is the water, the volumes of the tank, not thousands of gallons like a sand filter does. So when you do a cost analysis, you really start stretching that water bill because of that. And think about it too: the less water loss, the less chemicals, the less heat you need. So it's actually a very efficient system. Due to the fine media that's involved, there's a theoretical filtration up to 1 micron. And I personally say theoretical because I have yet to see absolute proof from any manufacturer that it does 1 micron. And I used to work for Neptune Benson, so let's just say that. But even though it's not 1 micron, or at least proven, you have outstanding water clarity. And again, the considerable water savings realized by not backwashing. So when I said outstanding water clarity, this is what I mean. So this is a typical stroke clinic, and you can see clearly to the other end of the pool. And this is a really big pool. So the fact that you can see the target lines on the other end, that's just a testament to the type of water clarity you will get from a regen filter. I have yet to see certain sand filters. They know they can't make this claim. I know one sand filter company that does, but it's it's a hard, it's an expensive filter. They use a really fine media, and even with that, the clarity's still not as good as that video. All right, and I've gone around. I go around pools, and when I jump in, I do I put my goggles on and I do a vision test across, and sometimes I'll take a picture of it, and there's nothing like looking at a regen filter pool. The clarity is just amazing. So now for the cons. So obviously the most the easiest con to get is the fact that you have to reload external media from time to time. Nothing beats a sand filter in terms of that. Sand filters are permanent media. You don't have to replace it so often. The cost for a regen filter, it's a higher initial capital cost, and there is some maintenance involved, not as much as a sand filter. You have pneumatic valves, you have a compressor, you have electronics that you have to deal with. So, to go into the 21st century, got to understand there is a higher initial cost, and the cost of ownership is also a little higher. But again, the benefits outweigh the cost to the owners out there. Pools that have heavy oils and dirt will have reduced filter cycles, and these are aspects that have to be addressed in the design phase. I find a lot of places they put in a regen filter, and then next thing you know, they're complaining because certain things are happening. I mean, okay, you put a regen filter in a pool that's right next to the ocean. These beach pools, I like to call them, and they get a lot of sand, and sand and media, they don't mix. So these are challenges that the end user usually ends up with. But once a couple of installs are done that way, the manufacturers they tend to keep up with those trends, and they figure out situations. And over time, even the end users they figure out too, ways to keep the sand out. Obviously, the number one culprit is the people jumping in the beach, and then they run into the pool, and of course they don't shower before they enter the pool, and they bring in all that sand. So these are things that they have to control. Obviously, the wind is something that probably can't be controlled, and you'll have those dust storms from time to time. Heavy oils, everybody wears sunscreen. There's people in indoor pools, people it's hard to get people to take a shower before entering the pool. These things build up over time, and they become a challenge. And then of course the maintenance, over time, that actually wreaks havoc on the perlite and the tubes as well. Eventually you'll end up with a point where you have oils built up on the tubes, and you're going to have to do what's called a chemical clean. If you do, I recommend an enzyme treatment that's pumped in. Always pump it in before the pump, which means you're going to have to get a pump that'll work on pretty high pressure. A Stenner high pressure pump would be the recommendation. Apologize. And an enzyme treatment will offset the oils, and it'll give you longer. It should give you longer cycles between chem cleans. All right. In terms of like design and planning, I would not consider a regen filter for a pool that has large year-round bather use. Training pools, for example, or if you have like an indoor like an indoor splash pad or indoor water feature with like a slide and stuff. That's a small body of water, but it gets hundreds and hundreds of people running through it. You're gonna find issues with your TDS. I had one facility that I won't name names, but their TDS got so high that in the first year, the aquatic director called me and literally told me that they did their tailored test kit for their chlorine, and the result came out orange. And you know, how do you compare? How do you do a comparator on that? So what ends up happening is you have to dump, and the moment a pool owner hears that they have to dump the pool, they're already talking about, hey, you know, you guys were telling me I'd save money. And well, you know, the big pool at that facility still going. I think they haven't drained the pool in it took 3 years before they drained that pool once they got educated on TDS. But it took that long for that pool to build up to a point where they realize it's time to drain. So, you know, you have to understand that TDS is a big factor. The good news is that the Langmuir saturation index, at least in the PHTA perspective, they now offer TDS factors up to 5,500 parts per million. So that's actually a good thing, because for a regen filter, you can now balance your pool based on higher TDSs. So that actually will help you extend your time to drain. All right. So understand that every pool has to be drained. As a matter of fact, some states require it, and some states are even a little anal about it. New York State, for example, you have to dump your pool 6 times a year. A lot of people don't know that, but yeah, Suffolk County actually will call you and ask you to send an email with the 6 dates that you plan on dumping and filling your pool. So imagine a 1,000,000-gallon pool, and we got a few of them out there that have to dump 6 times a year. Now, enforcement, that's another question, but you know, that's between the CPO and the health department at that point. Okay. Regen works well in really big pools, because if you could have 100 people a day in that 1,000,000-gallon pool, it really isn't putting a dent on the TDS and other factors that would cause you to have to drain. Okay. Another con is that since new pump rooms are typically built around the filter, since you have a small footprint, you tend to want to make the pump room small. And what ends up happening is there are people out there who end up not liking this filter, but then they're stuck because they have a small pump room and they can't switch to sand. Now, again, the number of people who have that problem is very, very small. There are tons more happy regen customers out there than people who don't want it anymore. But it is a con, because if you did, for whatever reason, wanted to switch, you're stuck with a small pump room. Okay. It's a fully automatic system. You're pressing buttons or a touch screen to do things. If a single component fails, a catastrophic failure can occur if it's not addressed quickly. Okay. Number one problem is usually a pre-coat valve fails to open when it's supposed to, and when that pump turns on, you know, some older systems still turn their pump on at 100%. When you get that hammer, man, stay away from that room, because chances are you're going to end up with an explosion. Okay, I've seen it and it's happened. All right. So it's very important to inspect constantly. You know, you can test your valves, make sure they fully open and close. You want to make sure your compressor is oiled properly. You want to make sure that the electronics are working, because you know only now the older regenerative filter systems that still have push button control panels, those push button systems are starting to fail, and they try to, you know, I have one customer right now. He can't even activate or open and close his effluent and manual valves using the little tricks that are out there. He literally had to take off the pneumatics, and he's actually opening and closing those valves manually. And in the meantime, they're trying to get the budget for an updated system. So that's the good news, is that when things start to fall apart, your manufacturers will probably have a good update for that. So it's always good to keep in touch with the manufacturer. All right. That's about all there is in terms of the cons. I don't. I like the filter. It's just that there's some places where it's not really the best fit for it. That's about my only thing. And then maintenance. I mean, I've seen filters that they haven't done any of their maintenance. You're supposed to, at least once a year, you're supposed to do a chem clean. At year 5, you're supposed to inspect your tubes, and you've got to do some other little things. Depends on the filter manufacturer, but the most important one is the 10-year maintenance. There is a lift shaft system that has O-rings and a bushing that have to be replaced. They wear out. And if you have an older system, and if the vent valve starts spitting out water, you're in for a treat, because you have to get the lift shaft serviced. Okay. Your rep should be on top of these things. They should be there to remind you. A good rep will do that. But I've run into facilities that completely didn't even know. They didn't read their manual, because it's clearly stated the type of maintenance, and they didn't do any of that. And man, doing those maintenance cycles when it's past when they're supposed to be done, it's a challenge. I've had to replace complete bump mechanisms, for example, because the shaft literally sticks to the bump mechanism. So not a fun thing. So considerations for selecting a regen filter if you're looking to put one in. First off, if you're a facility that's looking to do it, to make the switch, congratulations, you're making a very good choice. First thing you want to look at is the materials of construction. Cast iron epoxy coated is one way you can get it. Stainless steel, and they now have they have a fiberglass option now. There used to be one, but that company went the wayside, and now there's a new company that offers a fiberglass. You can still get these filters in a manual or automatic bump operation. A manual bump is basically a lever on the top of the filter that you gotta manually bump it. Most people don't get them, but you still find them around from time to time. You know what? It's worth the couple $1,000 upgrade. It definitely is. Go automatic. Don't do anything else. Access to the filter internals. You do have to do something to the tubes from time to time, because again, if you get oil buildup, there is a time where you're gonna have to literally get in there and hand wash with a hose. So I'll show you what some manufacturers have done for that. But that's a very important thing. You have to be able to get into the filter. Okay. The control panel. Today they're very user friendly. They actually will walk you through the process. So in places where you have a lot of turnover in maintenance staff, you can actually run a site. You can run the maintenance with a new person, and they will understand it on the first try, because it actually spells out what valves to close, what buttons to press, things like that. And then consider a very important consideration for especially for an existing pool is clearances for overhauls and repairs. Some filters require that you have to lift the lid off, and it has to have clearance for not only lifting, but it has to be able to tilt. You can tilt the lid to the side, so you have to make sure that you have clearance for that in the entire for the entire maintenance. If you got plumbing all over the place, Obviously, you're going to have to dismantle, which means unions and things like that. It could be really, really complicated. Fortunately, there are other filter manufacturers that have come up with interesting solutions for that, and we'll go over that. So currently in the market, there are 4 players in the United States, but again, North America, that do regenerative filters. So first from the left is the original regen filter. It's called, it's made by Filtrex. They currently have a OEM contract with Paddock Pools. So Paddock makes the tanks for them, and they're licensed to sell it as their own. I think it's called the Regenerator or something like that. But this is the original filter. It's a stainless steel tank. They put they do spray on a coating over it, but it is stainless steel. Everything is very simple. The owner of the company wanted to keep things simple, so it's got a simple PLC controller on it. It actually reads the flow rate on it, so it does come with a flow meter when you buy it. You have your influent and effluent pressure gauges. Your bump mechanism is here. They use a blower system instead of a vacuum, so it's really like industrial. It's like an industrial built system, and like I said, it's the original. Second is the Defender, made by Neptune Benson. Like I said, it started, the Neptune Benson Defender came out around the late 90s, and it is the #1 regenerative filter out there. Just a reminder, it is a cast iron tank with a Flexol system for the interior, so it's got a coating in it. It's a lot of people, there's pros and cons to that, but it keeps the cost down. Stainless steel is very expensive. Not to mean, it doesn't mean that you can't be competitive, because I know for a time in some areas, Filtrex beat out Neptune Benson in some bids. All right. A couple of things to point out on the Neptune Benson is that it's got a touchscreen system now, so it's really intuitive. It walks you through every step, and it gives you a lot of information. They made a very big improvement. Notice the tube window on the Filtrex is tiny. I mean, I could barely get my hand through it when I open it up. Neptune Benson used to have a small entrance, but now they've gone to this a bigger manway that allows you to have more access to the tubes. Okay, and that's pretty much it. The lid on the top can be lifted and it swings out. So again, that's something that you have to figure into when you're making a choice as to which filter you want. So a couple of years ago, a company out of Wisconsin called Aqua Revival came out. Aqua Revival, the owner is someone that used to work for Neptune Benson, and he actually owns the patent for the tube sheet, which is where it's the plate on the top that holds all the tubes. So because his name is on the patent, he's allowed to make his own regen filter. So what he's done is he's created a regenerative filter that actually meets NSF 50 and NSF 61 standards, which means you can use this in a drinking water system. Okay, it has a smaller footprint, which means that this is the big one. It's 60 inches in diameter. And it can actually, the height of it is such that it'll actually go through a double door system. So if you have a double door system that's wider than 60 inches, you can put that thing on a cart and walk it through. Okay. Looking at it, it sounds like it's a great idea. The issue I have though is right here. that drain port, you have to make sure now that your drain port, you may have to put this thing on a pedestal so that you can properly drain the tank out. So these are things that you have to consider. All right. Again, the designer has to take care of it. Another feature on this filter is the bump mechanism. It's electric. It's not pneumatic. So there's no pneumatics needed except for the pre-coat and effluent valve. It's electrically actuated, which means that you're gonna have to replace this thing every 3 to 5 years, because that's how much electronics typically work nowadays. So just one more thing you have to think about. Okay, and then to the right is the new guy in town. It's a company out of Canada called Aquify. So a couple of things that you can see from here is, one, that's a fiberglass tank. All right, their standard model comes stainless steel, painted blue, but that is a fiberglass unit. Okay, both the standard and the fiberglass are exactly the same. Notice how there's no lid. You can't take the lid off of it. Okay, what they did instead is they put manways on it. There's actually 2 manways on the top, like you see here. All right, and then they put one on the side. All right, and that's a standard manway, 18 by 14, I think. And what's good about that is you can yank that thing out, and if you need to, you can step into it. All right, it makes it a lot easier, especially on the top. You can do maintenance on the tubes and things like that. The plates actually rotate, and there's other innovations on this filter that make it pretty ideal. It's not a bad concept. I like that it's fiberglass, but as we know, fiberglass tends to be a little more pricey. I know of one filter. I know of one place that has an Aquify filter. It was just installed in the University of Rhode Island, and they love to give references. They will invite you to come see it, and you can talk to them. And then of course the national sales rep, he lives in Rhode Island, so nice to have a filter that's in your backyard. The funny thing is Neptune Benson has a Defender in that pump room too, and it's in their backyard too. But yeah, these are the four choices that you have in terms of what's available. Again, an engineer is definitely going to help you with the selection, because again, especially on a existing filter room, they got to look at so many things before they can even say which filter they want to go. All right, and that's really all there is to it. We've reached the end of the presentation, and I'm ready to take questions from anybody. Yeah, let me. Yep, you could unmute.
So if you unmute yourself, there's also a chat window, and I can read the question out loud if you want to use a chat window.
All right. Anybody have a question?
If there's anybody on Facebook Live, you can put in the chat window there, and I can read the question out loud to Clemente, and he can address your questions as well. So anybody have any questions? Everybody's hush, hush, quiet. Well, his contact info is up on the screen. So if you think of a question afterwards, you're welcome to give him a call, give him an email. So if there's no questions, we'll conclude with the training for today. Thank you so much for being on and sharing about regenerative filters today, Clemente.
Thank you.
And you guys have a great day. This will be up on the YouTube channel probably next week. So anybody that missed it, that sees it on Facebook Live and got in the middle, the whole recording will be available. So thank you very much, guys, for all being on today.
Right.